that Bitcoin will benchmark off of gold, and Bitcoin will be worth minimum, in my opinion, at least half of the total market capitalization of gold over time. It'll become a full-fledged asset class, and I think it has a lot of room to grow here. I think it could be probably take 5 to 7 years, maybe a touch longer. It could go from $90,000 to $1 million a coin as people start to adopt it.
Anthony Scaramucci begins with a reality check. Despite Bitcoin's trillion-dollar-plus market capitalization and constant media coverage, ownership remains a tiny fraction of the global population. In his view, Bitcoin is still just a small drop in the bucket in terms of actual adoption. That, paradoxically, is exactly what makes the opportunity compelling. He explains that over the past few years, something fundamental has changed. Bitcoin is no longer confined to crypto exchanges and self-custody wallets. It has entered the mainstream financial ecosystem through ETF from Fidelity, BlackRock, and other asset management giants.
Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space and drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks and enjoy the video.
It's a hard thing to understand. It's a very small drop in the bucket still in terms of the people that own it. But I predict as it mainstreams, as Fidelity brought an ETF, BlackRock, one of the largest asset managers in the world, brought an ETF, more and more people are getting this educational process and they're starting to understand it. And what I said to my clients 5 years ago, I said, you guys have to own it. I believe I understand it. I don't want you to be left out, and I'm going to purchase it for you. And we're going to purchase it in a reasonable amount of size so that for we're right, it'll be very successful for people. And thus far, touch on wood, knock on wood, we've been right. But it hasn't come without volatility. It hasn't come without uncertainty. It hasn't come with a lot of doubt about this because it is a new technology. One of the big skeptics on Bitcoin was Jamie Dimon, the CEO. He called it a pet rock. He said it was a Ponzi scheme, a decentralized Ponzi scheme. He said all these different things about Bitcoin, very negative on it. But also remember, he's behooved to the American Senate. He's behooved to the regulators, and people like Elizabeth Warren hate Bitcoin. She's on the Senate Banking Committee, so he has to talk his book. He's also making his money off of the old rails of financial technology and et cetera. But JP Morgan has spent hundreds of millions of dollars investing in the blockchain. They have their own token that they use in terms of internal transfers. They've adopted and put some funds. They've tokenized some of their funds to make them easier to sell and move on the blockchain and move them back and forth. And JP Morgan recently has said, okay, we've now accepted, because of this widespread introduction of the ETFs, and you have a QSIP number and it's easy to own Bitcoin in your brokerage account, that will actually use Bitcoin as a form of collateral. So if you own Bitcoin at JP Morgan, let's say you bought the BlackRock Bitcoin Trust, you have $1 million of it, we'll give you a 25% loan to value on it. So you could borrow $250,000 of collateral from our bank, borrow $250,000 of borrowings using Bitcoin as collateral. So the banks are starting to adopt it. One of the things that the regulators would have to do for the banks is give the banks regulatory approval to allow for full custody of Bitcoin. Right now, you can custody your wrapped Bitcoin in an electronically traded fund, an ETF, but you can't actually own the actual Bitcoin at a bank. You can own it at Coinbase, you can own it at Fidelity, you can own it at places like Galaxy, Mike Novograss's firm, but they're not regulated by the Federal Reserve and they're not inside the commercial or S&L banking system, if you will. So I predict that's coming. I predict that there will be legislation over the next 15 to 20 months that outline how a bank will be able to hold Bitcoin in custody. And then once it's able to do that, you'll see some Bitcoin-related transactions. Now, JP Morgan, interestingly enough, last week, they are floating a bond where if you lend money, it's based off of the price of Bitcoin, and there's certain levers in it to protect your downside. You also get your upside capped if it goes way, way up, but you earn a certain coupon and some percentage of the appreciation of Bitcoin. But if Bitcoin technically went to zero, you've got a floor in there too, through their derivative strategy. So it is starting to happen, Marshy. We are now starting to see Bitcoin-related products that are being offered by traditional firms. You're speaking to me on a very interesting day because 24 short hours ago, Vanguard, when the ETFs came into vogue, Vanguard said, no, we're not going to have Bitcoin as part of our stable of ETFs. That was January of 2024. It's now November of 2025. They have relented. And they said, okay, we're going to allow that now. We made a mistake. We're going to allow that. Bank of America, which has one of the largest brokerage firms, retail brokerage firms in the world embedded inside of Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, they purchased that during the global financial crisis. They just said, well, we like Bitcoin now, and we're going to allow our customers at our bank, through the ETF, they can own a 4% exposure to Bitcoin in terms of their total return portfolio. So again, along the lines that this is starting to mainstream, starting to become popular, I believe as a securities analyst, 37 years in the business, that Bitcoin will benchmark off of gold, and Bitcoin will be worth minimum, in my opinion, at least half of the total market capitalization of gold over time. It'll become a full-fledged asset class. And I think it has a lot of room to grow here. I think it could be, probably take 5 to 7 years, maybe a touch longer. It could go from $90,000 to $1 million a coin as people start to adopt it. Again, not overnight.
Right.
Certainly, if you look at the 17 years, it did go from a penny to $91,000. Historically incredible return, probably the best return in U.S. economic history. But I'm not saying it's going to do that again. But I do think as it matures, it'll get to a level something like half of the market capitalization of gold. I would just say axiomatically, I think gold will always be with us. I think axiomatically it will be perceived as a store of value. It has been for 5,000 years. It will be for the next 5,000 years. I think that Bitcoin, will emerge as part of that because we now have the technology to support it and the electricity. But how it unfolds and what the mechanisms are, I don't know. But I'm going to leave you with this parable, and I want you to think about it. And I'm going to take you back to 1998. Both of us are old enough to remember that year.
Yes.
Okay? And you had a fat box computer somewhere in your life, and underneath that computer was a dial-up modem. And when you were going to go log onto the internet, you burred and hummed, and maybe you went to Alcivita, Ask Jeeves, maybe you went to Yahoo, you went to some archaic search engine, AOL.
AOL. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
You got your email from AOL, and because you're a clever, forward-thinking person, maybe you bought a book from Amazon back in that day, and maybe you bought a Pez gun from eBay. Now, let's say I transported from 2025, and I met you in that study 27 short years ago, and I said, hey, Marsha, guess what? You see what you're doing right now, this clunky technology, it's very hard to maneuver. It's not really working that well. Let me tell you what's going to happen. In 27 short years, you're going to be in a flat screen computer. You're going to have broadband technology. So there's going to be billions of people downloading 4K video from the internet. It's going to wipe out that Blockbuster down the block, as hard as that is to believe, because I know it's super popular. It's also going to translate into trillions of dollars of transactions. Amazon's going to go to a $4 trillion market capitalization. They'll control more than half of the retail on the internet. And guess what? You and I are going to be talking to each other over this thing called the internet, and it's going to unleash a tremendous amount of productivity in our societies. And think about the introduction of all the social media and the streaming, and you get exactly on YouTube, the proliferation of YouTube, but you couldn't see it. In 1998, this clunky dial-up, you couldn't see it. But what happens is it iterates, Marsha, and it evolves, and then it moves exponentially. And over that 27-year period of time, look at the envelope of all of this.
One of Scaramucci's most powerful analogies is to the early internet. He asks listeners to imagine being in 1998. You're sitting at a bulky desktop computer. You connect to the internet with a dial-up modem. The connection squeals and hums. You browse Yahoo or Ask Jeeves. You check email through AOL. You maybe buy a book from Amazon or a Pez dispenser from eBay. The technology is clunky, slow, unreliable, and limited. Now imagine someone from 2025 appears and tells you, in 27 years, the internet will power trillions of dollars in commerce. Amazon will be worth $4 trillion. Video streaming will wipe out Blockbuster. Social media will reshape politics. People will work remotely, and billions will watch 4K video over broadband. You wouldn't believe it. Scaramucci argues that Bitcoin is at that exact stage. It is clunky. It is slow, it is expensive, it is misunderstood, but it is iterating and evolving. Over time, exponential improvements compound. What looks primitive today becomes foundational tomorrow.
Bitcoin is and again, not to get totally crazy with you, but it's a proof of work mechanism on the internet. You have to do these mathematical equations to earn Bitcoin, and when you share the Bitcoin back and forth with each other, there's a lot of math surrounding it. The way something like a Solana or an Ethereum works is called proof of stake. Everybody puts up their stake on the internet, and then the transactions are verified through that staking process. And so that's a faster way of doing it. It's less costly, and it uses less electricity, and you can get a lot of transactions through the pipe very quickly if you're using proof of stake versus proof of work. And so a group of computer programmers got a look at Bitcoin and said, wow, this thing is fascinating. This guy named Vitalik Buterin said, Bitcoin's fascinating. I'm a big Bitcoin person, but I think we can develop a different technology on the blockchain. He called it Ethereum, and we could use it to create a tokenized world where we can actually take contracts. We can have a layer one technology and then put an additional layer on it, a smart contract, and we can run it over the rail system of Ethereum or Solana. I'm going to promote my book if you don't mind. I just wrote a book about Solana, which is the sister book to the Bitcoin book I wrote last year. It's coming out in a few weeks. I'll send you a copy. But it just describes that process. And basically, something like Solana or something like Ethereum, what you can do is you can tokenize things. So instead of me having a stock with a CUSIP and say, I want to sell my stock to you, well, it's got to go through 7 different agents and a DTC before it transfers into your account. Now, when I got in the business, that was trade day plus 5 days, took a very long time. And now it's trade day plus 1 day. But if we did it over the blockchain, we could do it in a few minutes. And so I'm predicting, Larry Fink is predicting, very smart people in the future of finance, even Jamie Dimon is predicting is that we will use the blockchain to tokenize stocks and bonds and potentially real estate. And we will be able to use this rail system and trade with each other frictionless without lots of costs that have typically been associated with these transactions over the years. Just better technology to be used in our transactions with each other. I think that we are 3 to 5 years away. I don't think it's imminent. I think we were slowed down by the prior administration. I think that if we had the current regulatory rubric in place, we would already be there. But here's what happens. The banks don't like this. Why would the banks like this? Well, there's going to be no more credit card fees. Well, would banks like that? No, they wouldn't like that because they earn a 3.5% charge on these fees. There'll be no more wire fees. Well, the banks make money on administration and wire fees. Why would that? So they lobby the American Congress and they tell them, hey, please don't allow for this new technology, right? We have a horse and buggy. We get around town with the horse and buggy. Don't let the horseless carriage come in. If you remember, in most of the urban cities, Uber was an important ride-sharing technology. It was innovative. It would reduce the costs, increase supply. The taxi cabs didn't like it. The mayors were lobbied by the taxi cab lobbyists, and they said they didn't like it, and on it goes. So that's the story. And I will tell you something. We're going to get there, and I'm going to tell you something that's axiomatic about this. If you have a new technology, and you have a new technology that is better than the old technology, guess what happens? It gets adopted. The cabs didn't want Uber. The mayor didn't want Uber, but Marcia, who wanted Uber? The people. The people wanted Uber. Yeah. Okay. And so this is a technology that's going to save people money. If you go to ChatGPT, and again, I don't know if this is 100% accurate. I've asked my research team. They think it is, but I'll share it with you. The estimate is about $4 trillion of transaction verifications take place globally. So that would be a credit card fee. That would be a wiring fee, an admin fee. That would be also including closing of a house, the money that goes to the lawyer and the money that goes to the bank and all the different closing fees to verify the sale or the purchase of the house. And so if you told me we had technology where we could make these things go faster and we could then lower the costs, I would say, okay, that's going to get adopted. Now, one last point before we go to another question. I am talking to you right now over Zoom. This is a technology we didn't have 40 years ago. We're now in the George Jetson realm where we can do this over Zoom. But I just want you to imagine 40 years ago, I was walking into a post office in Rome. And I was asking for an AT&T card, which gave me a unit of time to call my parents. It was $15. I could call my parents for 5 minutes. It was $3 a minute. Now I can go anywhere in the world and hook up into a cafe's internet, and I can make a George Jetson call to my parents. So is this a better technology? Yes. Is it costless? Yes. So did it get adopted? Yes, it did. And now you see the direction I'm going in as it relates to the blockchain and as it relates to things like Bitcoin. And so I submit to you that Bitcoin will be a technology that registers with human society as a store of value as it gets scaled and adopted. And so it's about a $2 trillion market capitalization now. And gold is about a $40 trillion market capitalization. It went up a lot this year, as we both know. But if Bitcoin just got to half of the valuation of gold, it's a 10x from here. And I believe, it's not my generation. I'm going to be 62 years old. I'm talking about a 40-year-old. I'm talking about a 35-year-old, 10 years from now, will be running an asset management company at age 45 in his or her prime. And they're going to be very comfortable with Bitcoin. They grew up in a digital age. They played video games. They've been online since the beginning of their lives. And they're very comfortable holding Bitcoin as a store of value or as something that I would refer to as digital gold. So, okay, so that's my soliloquy. I'm sorry I was so long-winded, but I think it's impossible to explain Bitcoin in a few sentences. It needs a little bit more, and it needs some examples.
Scaramucci is not a Bitcoin maximalist. He spends considerable time explaining why Ethereum, Solana, and other proof-of-stake blockchains matter. Bitcoin uses proof of work. It is secure but slow and energy-intensive. Ethereum and Solana use proof of stake. They are faster, cheaper, and better suited for high-volume transactions. Today, transferring a stock requires multiple intermediaries and days of settlement. On a blockchain, it could happen in minutes. Banks lobby against this transition, just as taxi companies lobbied against Uber, but Scaramucci's conclusion is ruthless. If a new technology is better than the old one, it gets adopted. That is not ideology. That is economic law. Scaramucci cites an estimate, roughly $4 trillion per year is spent globally just on transaction verification. Credit card fees, wire fees, closing costs, administrative costs. Blockchain technology can dramatically reduce those costs. History shows that when a technology saves people money, it wins. He draws a final analogy: long-distance phone calls.